Story 1. Hi, nice to meet you. I'm a nurse. So there's this question us doctors and nurses get asked frequently. The question is, what's the thing you regret the most about becoming a doctor? What would you expect the answer to be? I asked this question to my friends and family. What do you think the answer is? Most of them seem to think that we hate the long hours and terrible sleeping patterns. But that's not true. It's amazing what humans can get used to. What do you think it is? Well, I'll tell you. When you become a doctor, you start to realize that doctors really don't care about their patients at all. Most of them only care about how much money they earn or about their career. What do you hate the most about your profession? I used to work in the terminal ward. Not many doctors around, mainly just nurses. Most of the patients were old, many of them half senile. I had this patient I was particularly fond of. The man would always walk around the ward and talk to other patients and nurses. Really nice guy. Even though he was very ill himself, he would always cheer up new patients who entered the ward. I felt bad for the guy. He was so nice, but he was going to die at the ripe age of 34. One day, one of my colleagues is helping a family get over their grandmother's death. A nice old lady who'd been in the ward for roughly 6 months. She'd passed away peacefully overnight. The family had gathered around her body, which was still on the hospital bed of her room. So, anyway, the guy didn't tell me how he noticed, but he notices a little prick at the back of a dead patient's ear. Thinking it's strange, he looks at some other dead patients in the morgue and notices the same prick on other patients. Turns out, the nice and cheerful man who had helped so many others in the hospital had been killing terminally ill patients, mostly very old ones who were on the verge of death. But he was murdering them all the same. We'd never found out about it as no one ever did a full body check of the dead bodies in the terminal ward. After all, we were expecting them to die soon, and the reason of death was pretty clear. Why would we bother? I never found out why the man did this. Maybe he was just terrified of death. He killed many of the patients and watched them die to see what would happen. He wanted to see what would happen to him, to see what happens when people die. Or maybe he was just angry that he was dying at such a young age. He wanted to kill as many people as he could before he died himself. I could imagine him asking the patients as they died, "What does it feel like? Does it hurt?" He didn't even have time to go to court. He died 2 weeks after. What do you hate the most about your profession? Since I've started working as a nurse, I can't trust people. Full stop. Story 2. A Yakuza encounter. This taught me a while back an important life lesson. Don't fuck with the Yakuza. I work in retail. I was coming back after a trip to my client's office when I end up at this massive traffic jam. The traffic seems to continue till a train crossing. The guys who had planned the roads here hadn't done a good job. There's this big black car far in front of me which is slow in crossing. They don't make it and end up being stuck again as another train arrives. A man driving a white Mercedes behind the black car in front starts getting angry. He beeps his horn and shouts out to the slow car in front, "You fucking idiot. What are you playing at?" And that kind of thing. So this guy comes out of the black car in front. He seems like a normal dude. In fact, he was quite skinny. He's dressed in a black suit. The only problem was, he's got a golf club in his hand. As he steps out, someone else dressed in black steps out of the car. The guy behind them starts to look pale. He closes his car window and cowers back in his car. But it's too late. He's pissed off the wrong people. Without a word, the two guys dressed in black drag the guy out of the car. They then proceed to beat the shit out of him with golf clubs. The guy's rolling on the floor, crying and sobbing, blood gushing out of his face and head. The thin man steps on his left hand, and I can hear the cracking sound as he smashes his knuckle bones into pieces. They pay no attention to what the man is saying. Eventually, the man becomes silent, and the men return to their car. The train leaves, and they drive off, like nothing had happened. Me and the rest of the drivers are left behind, mouths open wide, shitting ourselves quietly. I guess they must have been Yakuza. Story 3. A story about a Hikikomori. We have too many Hikikomoris in Japan. These are guys who lock themselves in their rooms and refuse to talk to the outside world. Sometimes, even their own families. But people don't become a Hikikomori because they want to. They become a Hikikomori because they're forced to. This is about a guy I used to know when I was younger. I'm not being biased when I say, this guy was a nice guy. I met him when I was around 6 years old. We even used to go to the same kindergarten. He was a scrawny kid, unsocial. I guess it was inevitable that he would end up getting bullied all the time. After having been beaten up roughly when we were 14, he eventually stopped going to our school. Maybe I could have done more to help, but I was just a weak little kid at the time too. I hadn't wanted to get bullied either. Besides, we hadn't been that amazing of friends anyway. Anyway, I'm 24 now and I'm working for this big firm after leaving university. I've been away from home for about a year and I hadn't managed to go home even once in the year I started working because I was just too busy. Maybe I just couldn't be bothered. Probably the latter. I walk out of the station and I start the 15-minute walk to my parents' house. I'd come down after finishing work and it was now pretty late. I think it was around 10 p.m. at that point. I'd come after eating dinner, but I felt a little peckish, so I dropped by the local 7-Eleven, which was between the station and my parents' place. I take a bit of a detour and find the 7-Eleven I always used to visit so often as a kid. I actually sighed in relief when I saw the shop. In Japan, shops close and pop up all the time. I wouldn't have been surprised if 7-Eleven would have closed their branch in a shitty, unpopulated area like this. These days, I always look at my phone wherever and whatever time, mainly due to work. But I'm also obsessed with this mobile game called Shadowverse at the moment. So, I admit what happened next was completely my fault. I walk into the 7-Eleven, or try to walk into the 7-Eleven, while looking at my phone, and I bump into this guy who was just leaving. I wasn't paying attention at all, and I go spiraling onto the pavement behind me. I hit my back, hard. Groaning, I lay there for a second and looked at my phone lying next to me. It had a little scratch, but no crack. Phew, it was fine. As I'm there lying on the floor like an idiot, the guy I bump into gives me his hand. He very timidly asks, "Are you all right?" This guy helps me up to my feet and I apologize, telling him it's completely my fault for not looking where I was going. The man seemed to be quite a few years older than me and had a rather untamed beard. Not very sexually appealing. It was as if he couldn't be bothered to shave, or perhaps he had no need to shave. He was carrying a big bag full of Nissin cup noodles. In reply to my apology, he simply mumbles something and then walks past me and out the door. Sighing again, I brush dirt off my jacket and trousers. I'm about to finally walk into the shop when, suddenly, someone grabs my shoulder from behind. Surprised, I immediately swing my body around to face the entrance of the convenience store. It was that bearded guy again. He lifts his head up towards my face and looks at me as if I'm some sort of ghost. A bit scared, I ask him if everything was okay. But without answering, he runs off before I have a chance to talk to him properly. It was a few months after that I found out who the bearded man was. I was at work when I got the call from my parents. I got a bit annoyed at first that they'd called me when I was busy. They kept on calling me over and over again, and it seemed they didn't plan to stop until I answered my phone. They explained to me that it was very urgent. Do you remember the friend I mentioned at the start of this story? The Hikikomori. The one who got severely bullied when we were kids? Well, he committed suicide. Around a week later, I was back in my hometown, attending the funeral. My poor friend didn't have a father, and it pained me to see his mother crying all the way through the funeral. I guess she was going to live all by herself from now on. The sad thing about suicide is that it hurts deeply everybody who had a relationship with that person. Is there something I could have done? Am I to blame? Watching the mother cry, I swore to myself I'd never do what my friend had done. Everyone took turns to give their blessings to the mother. When it was finally my turn, I was lost for words. I had no idea what to say to her. I just stood there, feeling that I should say something, but just too dumb to speak. But as I thought desperately, it was the mother that spoke to me before I had a chance to speak. "Thank you," she says to me. I shake my head. "No, you have nothing to thank me about." "No, I need to thank you. Thank you for staying in contact with my son, even after all these years." I was so confused. What was she on about? I hadn't talked to him since I was in high school. Was she confusing me with someone else? She then goes on to tell me that he'd mentioned me on the night in which he committed suicide. About how he'd chatted to me recently. He'd also asked her about what I was doing now after graduating high school. I didn't understand, but I just said, "Don't mention it," and walked past her. I then sat down in the funeral hall and waited for the ceremony to start. In Japan, they make you sit for ages in an uncomfortable position on the floor during a funeral. So to try to take my mind off the pain, I looked around at the funeral hall and at my friend's shrine, far at the front of the hall, placed in front of the Buddhist priest, as usually happens in Japanese funerals. It was at this moment that I finally understood everything. Why the mother had thought I was still close friends with her son, why I'd been called to the funeral, even after all these years. At the front of the hall was the temporary shrine of my old friend. It was surrounded by flowers, and above it there were pictures of what he used to look like. The bearded man I'd bumped into at 7-Eleven was my friend. He must have looked much older than me due to all the stress he must have built up inside of himself after all these years. Even though in the picture he was smiling, I could see the pain in his eyes. I think he might have committed suicide because of me. The poor guy had distanced himself from all the people he used to know, everyone but his mom. I think maybe I'd been his best friend, or maybe the only friend he ever had. Having bumped into me that night, he must have pretended to still be friends with me and asked about what was going on now. Having found out that I graduated university and was now working at a large firm, he must have felt insignificant in comparison to me. After all, he hadn't even graduated high school. I suppose I could be thinking into it too much, but I can't help but feel that I'm responsible for his death as well.